The saw blade screamed through timber as Faye Lockhart pushed another log into position, her pregnant belly brushing against the work table, despite her attempts to keep distance between herself and the equipment. She had been hiding her condition for 3 months now, wearing loose cotton shirts and keeping to the shadows of the lumber mill, where she worked 6 days a week for 12 hours each day. It was 1884 in Terlingua, Texas, a town that clung to existence on the edge of the Chihuahuan Desert, and pregnant women without husbands did not keep their positions at respectable establishments. The timber operation here served the growing mining community, bringing in lumber from distant forests to shore up the mercury mines that gave Terlingua its purpose. The August heat made everything worse. Sweat ran down her face and soaked through her shirt as she guided another plank through the cutting process. Her back ached constantly now, and her feet had swollen so much that her boots cut into her ankles. But she could not stop. She could not rest. The moment anyone discovered her secret, she would lose everything she had worked so hard to build since arriving in this harsh desert town 2 years ago. "Lockhart, you are falling behind on your quota again," the foreman shouted over the noise of the mill. "Boss Harrison wants to see you in his office when the shift ends." Faye's heart sank into her stomach. Kade Harrison owned the timber operation, having built it from nothing when he arrived in Terlingua 5 years prior. He was known as a fair but demanding employer who expected every worker to pull their weight. At 28 years old, he had a reputation for being one of the most successful businessmen in the territory, and he did not tolerate laziness or excuses. She wiped her forehead with the back of her hand and nodded, then returned her attention to the work. The next 4 hours passed in a blur of sawdust and heat, her body protesting every movement. By the time the final whistle blew, Faye could barely stand upright. She made her way to the small wooden structure that served as the office, climbing the 3 steps with careful deliberation. Each movement sent sharp pains through her lower back. The office door stood open to catch whatever breeze might drift through, though in August that was a futile hope. Kade Harrison sat behind a large desk covered in ledgers and timber orders, his dark hair slightly damp with perspiration. His shirt sleeves rolled up to reveal forearms tanned by years of working alongside his crew. He looked up when she entered, and his green eyes studied her with an intensity that made her nervous. "Close the door," he said quietly. Faye did as instructed, her hands trembling slightly. This was it. He had figured it out. She would be dismissed, and she would have nowhere to go with a baby coming in 4 months. "Sit down before you fall down," Kade said, gesturing to the chair across from his desk. She lowered herself carefully into the seat, grateful to be off her feet even as dread pooled in her chest. Kade leaned back in his chair, his expression unreadable. "How far along are you?" The question hit her like a physical blow. For a moment she considered denying it, but the look in his eyes told her that would be pointless. 5 months, she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "And you have been working full shifts in the mill this entire time." It was not a question, but she answered anyway. "I need the work, Mr. Harrison. I have no other means of supporting myself." He was silent for a long moment, his jaw working as if he were chewing over his thoughts. "The father, gone," Faye said flatly. "He left town the day I told him. I have not seen him since." Kade's expression darkened. "A coward then." "Yes." Another silence stretched between them. Outside, the sounds of the mill crew heading home for the evening drifted through the windows. Faye waited for the inevitable dismissal, her mind already racing through impossible scenarios. She had some money saved, but not enough to last through the pregnancy and the months after when she would be unable to work. There was no family to return to. Her parents had died of fever when she was 16 and she had no siblings. "You cannot continue working the saw line," Kade finally said. "It is too dangerous and you are clearly exhausted." "Please, Mr. Harrison, I will work harder. I will make my quota." "I just need," he held up a hand, cutting her off. "I did not say I was dismissing you. I said you cannot continue on the saw line." Faye blinked, certain she had misheard him. "I do not understand. Starting tomorrow, you will work in the office." "I need someone to manage the invoices and correspondence. The pay is the same, but the hours are 8 per day instead of 12, and you will have Sundays off in addition to Saturday afternoons." She stared at him, unable to process what he was saying. "You are giving me a better position." "I am giving you a position that will not kill you or your child," Kade corrected. "The work still needs to be done, and from what I have observed, you are intelligent and meticulous. Those qualities are wasted on the saw line. But I am unmarried and pregnant. People will talk." "People always talk. I pay no attention to gossip, and neither should you." He pulled a ledger from the stack on his desk and opened it. "Come in at 7 tomorrow morning. I will show you what needs to be done." Faye felt tears burning in her eyes, but she blinked them back fiercely. She would not cry in front of her employer. "Thank you, Mr. Harrison. I will not disappoint you. See that you do not." His tone was gruff, but there was something in his eyes that looked almost like concern. And Faye, it was the first time he had used her given name. "Yes. If you are struggling, you will tell me. No more hiding things until you collapse." "Understood," she nodded, not trusting her voice. "Good. Now go home and get some rest. You look like death warmed over." The walk back to her small rented room at the boarding house took 20 minutes, and by the time Faye arrived, her vision was swimming with exhaustion. Mrs. Crawford, the landlady, gave her a sharp look as she climbed the stairs but said nothing. The older woman had been giving her suspicious glances for weeks now, and Faye knew it was only a matter of time before her condition became obvious to everyone. But at least now, she had a position that would allow her to work through her pregnancy. At least Kade Harrison had shown her an unexpected kindness. She fell onto her narrow bed fully clothed and was asleep within seconds. The next morning, Faye arrived at the office at 6:45, determined to prove herself worthy of the opportunity she had been given. Kade was already there, standing beside a second desk that had been moved into the room sometime after she left the previous evening. "This is yours," he said without preamble. "The invoices from the past 3 months are in these boxes. They need to be organized by customer and cross-referenced with the delivery logs. Once that is complete, we need to send out statements for overdue accounts." Faye nodded, taking in the mountain of paperwork. It was daunting, but it was work she could do sitting down, and for that she was profoundly grateful. The days fell into a new rhythm. Faye arrived each morning to find Kade already at work, reviewing contracts or meeting with potential customers. They worked in companionable silence most of the time, broken occasionally by questions about the business or brief exchanges about the work that needed to be done. He was not a talkative man, but he was patient when explaining the filing system and the particular needs of various clients. As the weeks passed, Faye's belly grew more prominent, and with it came new challenges. Her ankles swelled even more, and she found herself needing to use the outhouse more frequently. She was embarrassed by these physical realities, but Kade never commented on them. When he noticed her shifting uncomfortably in her chair, he would suggest she take a walk around the property to stretch her legs. When the heat became oppressive in the afternoon, he would close the office early and send her home. "You are being too kind to me," she told him one day in late September when he insisted she leave 2 hours early because she looked pale. "I am being practical," he replied, not looking up from the contract he was reviewing. If you make yourself sick, I will have to train someone else, and I do not have time for that." But Faye suspected there was more to it than practicality. She had caught him watching her sometimes with an expression that seemed almost worried. Once, when she had stumbled slightly while carrying a heavy ledger, he had been at her side in an instant, taking the book from her hands and guiding her back to her chair with a gentleness that surprised her. "You should not be lifting heavy things," he had said, his voice gruff. "It was just a ledger. It was too heavy for you in your condition." After that, he had rearranged the office so that anything she might need was within easy reach. He never made a fuss about these small changes, but Faye noticed them all. October brought cooler temperatures to the desert, a blessed relief after the brutal summer heat. Faye was now 6.5 months along, and no amount of loose clothing could hide her condition anymore. The mill workers had figured it out, and she could feel their eyes on her whenever she crossed the yard to use the outhouse or take one of her prescribed walks. Some of the looks were judgmental, but most were simply curious. "Let them stare," Kade told her when she mentioned it. "Their opinions mean nothing. Do you not worry about what they think of you for keeping me on?" He finally looked up from his work, his green eyes meeting hers directly. "No. But your reputation, my reputation, is built on running a successful business and treating my workers fairly. What the gossips say in the saloon has no bearing on either of those things." Faye felt warmth spread through her chest that had nothing to do with the weather. "You are a good man, Kade Harrison." Something flickered in his expression, but it was gone before she could identify it. "I am a practical man. There is a difference." But as the days continued to pass, Faye began to suspect that Kade's treatment of her went beyond mere practicality. He brought her breakfast most mornings, claiming he had extra from the boarding house where he took his meals. He made sure there was always fresh water in the office. When she mentioned once that her back ached constantly, he appeared the next day with a cushion for her chair. "Where did this come from?" she asked, touched by the gesture. "I had it made. The carpenter owed me a favor." These small kindnesses accumulated like gold dust, and Faye found herself looking forward to the hours in the office not just because the work was manageable, but because she enjoyed Kade's company. He was intelligent and well-read, despite his rough exterior. Sometimes, during slow afternoon hours, they would talk about books or about his plans for expanding the business. He told her about growing up in Missouri, about how he had come west after his parents died, seeking something more than the life of a farmer's son. "And you found it in timber," she said. "I found it in building something that was mine. The timber was just the means." She understood that on a deep level. She had come to Texas seeking the same thing, a life of her own making, independent and free. The pregnancy had complicated those dreams, but working for Kade had given her hope that she might still achieve some version of them. In early November, when Faye was 7 months pregnant, something changed between them. She could not pinpoint exactly when it happened, but she became increasingly aware of Kade's presence in a way that had nothing to do with employer and employee. She noticed the way his hair fell across his forehead when he was concentrating. She noticed the strength in his hands as he moved boxes that she could no longer lift. She noticed the line of his jaw and the rare smile that sometimes crossed his face when something amused him, and she was fairly certain he had begun noticing her in return. His gaze lingered on her face when he thought she was not looking. He found excuses to move closer, to stand beside her desk when reviewing documents. Once, when she had stood up too quickly and swayed with dizziness, he had caught her by the shoulders, and the touch had sent electricity through her entire body. "Careful," he had murmured, his face very close to hers. "I am fine. Just stood up too fast." But he had not released her immediately. For a heartbeat, they had stood frozen, his hands warm on her shoulders, his eyes searching her face. Then he had stepped back and the moment had passed. Faye told herself she was being foolish. She was 7 months pregnant with another man's child. She had no business developing feelings for her employer, especially one who had shown her such kindness. It would be taking advantage of his generosity. But the heart did not always listen to reason. The first week of December brought an unexpected cold snap to Terlingua. Frost formed on the windows of the office, and Faye wrapped herself in a shawl as she worked. Kade kept the small stove in the corner burning throughout the day, but the building was poorly insulated, and the cold seemed to seep through the walls. On a particularly bitter morning, Faye arrived to find Kade installing a second stove. "You will freeze to death in here otherwise," he said when she questioned him about the expense. "I am already wearing 2 layers. That is not enough." He finished connecting the stovepipe and stood, brushing soot from his hands. "You need to stay warm. It is important for the baby." Faye felt tears prick her eyes again, a common occurrence these days thanks to the unpredictable emotions of pregnancy. "You have done so much for me already. I do not know how I will ever repay you." Kade was silent for a long moment, his back still to her as he adjusted the stove's damper. When he finally turned around, his expression was serious. "I do not want repayment, Faye." "Then what do you want?" The question hung in the air between them, weighted with meaning she had not entirely intended. Kade took a step toward her, then seemed to think better of it and stopped. "I want you to be safe. I want you to be healthy." He broke off, running a hand through his hair in a gesture of frustration. "It does not matter what I want. It matters to me." He looked at her then, really looked at her, and Faye saw something in his eyes that made her breath catch. But before either of them could say anything more, the office door burst open and Tom Fletcher, the mill foreman, rushed in. "Boss, we have a problem. One of the main support beams in the cutting shed has cracked. The whole structure is unstable." Kade's expression immediately shifted to one of focused concern. "Show me." He left without another word, and Faye was left alone with her racing thoughts and the ghost of whatever had almost happened between them. The problem with the cutting shed consumed Kade's attention for the next several days. He was at the mill from dawn until well after dark, overseeing the repairs and ensuring the structure was safe for his workers. Faye saw him only briefly each morning when he stopped by the office to check on urgent matters before returning to the construction site. She tried to tell herself it was for the best. Whatever had been building between them needed to be forgotten. She was not in a position to pursue any kind of relationship, and he was her employer. The power dynamic alone made it inappropriate, but she missed him. She missed their conversations and his quiet presence. She missed the way he made her feel safe and valued. On the 4th day of repairs, Faye was working through the lunch hour, having lost track of time while organizing a complex shipment schedule. She stood to retrieve a file from the cabinet across the room and felt a sudden sharp pain in her lower back. She gasped and grabbed the edge of the desk, waiting for it to pass, but it did not pass. Instead, the pain intensified, wrapping around her abdomen like a vice. Faye cried out, her legs buckling beneath her. She did not remember falling. One moment she was standing and the next she was on the floor, agony radiating through her body. Through the haze of pain, she heard the office door slam open. "Faye," Kade's voice sharp with panic. Then he was beside her, his hands on her shoulders, her face. "What happened? Where does it hurt?" "My back," she gasped, "and my stomach. Something is wrong. The baby do not move." His face was pale beneath his tan. "I am going to carry you to the doctor. The shed, to hell with the shed." He slid one arm beneath her knees and the other behind her back, lifting her as if she weighed nothing despite her pregnant bulk. Hold on to me." Faye wrapped her arms around his neck, another wave of pain making her cry out. Kade kicked the office door open and strode out into the cold December afternoon. The mill yard was full of workers on their lunch break, and they all stopped to stare as their boss carried the pregnant office clerk across the compound. "Someone get Doc Miller and tell him to meet me at the boarding house," Kade shouted. Now, two men took off running. Kade adjusted his grip on Faye and began walking quickly toward the main road. "I am too heavy," Faye protested weakly. "You are light as a feather. Save your strength." The walk to the boarding house took 10 minutes, though it felt like an eternity. Each step Kade took jostled Faye, sending fresh waves of pain through her body. She buried her face in his shoulder, trying not to scream. Mrs. Crawford met them at the door, her eyes wide with alarm. "What happened?" She collapsed. "Doc Miller is on his way. We need a bed." The landlady led them upstairs to Faye's small room. Kade laid her gently on the bed, then stood back, his hands clenching and unclenching at his sides as if he did not know what to do with them. "I should not have left you alone," he said, his voice rough. "I should have been there. You could not have known," Faye managed between gasps. "The repairs were important." "Nothing is more important than," he broke off as Doc Miller burst into the room, his medical bag in hand. The doctor was in his 60s, with gray hair and a no-nonsense manner. He took one look at Faye's contorted face and began barking orders. "Everyone out except Mrs. Crawford. I need to examine her." Kade did not move. "I am staying." "Mr. Harrison, this is not proper. I am staying," Kade repeated, his tone brooking no argument. Doc Miller looked at Faye, who managed a small nod. The doctor sighed but did not argue further. "Fine, but stand over there and do not get in my way." The examination seemed to take forever. Faye answered the doctor's questions as best she could between contractions, because that was what they were, she realized with growing horror. She was having contractions, and she was only 7.5 months along. Finally, Doc Miller sat back, his expression grave. "The baby is trying to come early. We need to stop the labor if possible." "How do we do that?" Kade demanded. "Complete bed rest. No movement, no stress, no work. She needs to lie still and pray that the contractions stop on their own." "For how long?" "Until the baby comes to term." "Another 6 weeks at minimum." Faye felt panic surge through her. "I cannot stay in bed for 6 weeks. I need to work. You need to listen to the doctor," Kade interrupted. "Your job will be waiting when you are recovered. Right now, you focus on staying healthy." "But I cannot afford." "You will be paid your full salary," Kade said firmly. "Consider it sick leave." "That is too much. I cannot accept." Another contraction tore through her, cutting off her protest. When it finally subsided, she found Kade kneeling beside the bed, his face level with hers. "Yes, you can accept it, and you will," he said quietly. "Let me help you, Faye, please." There was something in his eyes, something desperate and tender, that made her defenses crumble. She nodded weakly. Doc Miller left medication to help ease the contractions and strict instructions for bed rest. Mrs. Crawford, who had been listening from the corner, promised to check on Faye regularly and bring her meals. Kade paid the doctor and the landlady both, pressing extra money into Mrs. Crawford's hands. "Anything she needs, you come to me," he told the older woman. "Anything at all." After everyone left, Kade remained. He pulled the room's single chair closer to the bed and sat down. "You should go back to work," Faye said. "The shed still needs repairs." "Tom can handle it. I am staying here." "Kade, I am staying," he repeated. "You are not going to be alone right now." Faye wanted to argue, but another part of her, a part that had been alone for so long, desperately wanted him to stay. So she said nothing, and Kade settled into the chair as if he planned to remain there forever. The contractions gradually subsided over the next few hours. aided by the doctor's medication and forced stillness. Kade sat vigil beside the bed, occasionally standing to adjust her pillows or bring her water. As evening fell, Mrs. Crawford brought up dinner on a tray, soup and bread for both of them. "You need to eat," Kade said, helping Faye sit up slightly so she could manage the soup without spilling it. "I am not very hungry. Eat anyway. For the baby." She managed half the bowl before exhaustion overtook her. Kade took the tray away and returned with a damp cloth, gently wiping her face. "Thank you," Faye whispered, "for everything. For carrying me here, for staying," for her voice broke. "For caring." Kade's hand stilled, the cloth resting against her cheek. "Of course I care. How could I not? I am your employee. You barely know me." "I know enough." His thumb traced a gentle line along her jaw. "I know you are strong and stubborn and brave. I know you work harder than anyone I have ever met. I know you deserve better than what life has given you." Tears spilled down Faye's cheeks. "I am a disaster. I am pregnant and alone, and you are not alone." Kade's voice was fierce. "You are not alone, Faye, not anymore." She looked up at him, searching his face in the lamplight. "What are you saying?" He was quiet for a long moment, his hand still cradling her face. "I am saying that I have feelings for you. I have had them for months now, but I did not think it was appropriate to say anything given the circumstances. But after today, after nearly losing you," he swallowed hard, "I cannot keep silent anymore." Faye's heart was pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. "You have feelings for me, but I am pregnant with another man's child. I do not care about that. The baby deserves a father who will love and protect them. I want to be that man, if you will let me." "Kade, you cannot possibly mean marry me," he said suddenly. "Marry me, Faye. Let me take care of you and the baby. Let me give you the life you deserve." She stared at him, certain she must be hallucinating from the medication. "You want to marry me, more than I have ever wanted anything." "But why? You could have any woman in Terlingua. You are successful and respected. Why would you want someone like me?" Kade leaned forward, resting his forehead gently against hers. "Because you make me laugh with your dry observations about difficult customers. Because you understand what it means to build something from nothing. Because when I walk into the office and see you working, my entire day gets better. Because somewhere along the way I fell completely in love with you." Faye's breath caught. "You love me." "I love you," he confirmed. "I love your strength and your stubbornness, and the way you refuse to give up no matter how hard things get. I love the kindness you show to the mill workers even though some of them have been cruel to you. I love everything about you." Fresh tears streamed down her face, but these were different from the earlier ones. These were tears of joy and relief and overwhelming emotion. "I love you too," she whispered. "I have been trying not to, but I do. I love you so much it terrifies me." Kade made a sound that was half laugh, half sob. He pressed his lips to her forehead, then her cheeks, kissing away her tears. "Say yes, please say yes." "Yes," Faye breathed. "Yes, I will marry you." He kissed her then, soft and careful, as if she were made of spun glass. It was nothing like the rough kisses she had received from the man who had left her pregnant and alone. This kiss was tender and reverent, a promise of protection and love. When they finally pulled apart, Kade was smiling, and Faye realized it was the first time she had seen him truly happy. It transformed his face, making him look younger and lighter. "I will take care of everything," he said. "We will get married as soon as possible, and then I will move you into my house where I can make sure you rest properly." "You have a house?" "I bought one last year. It is small but comfortable, with 2 bedrooms and a proper kitchen. There is even a small garden that the previous owner planted." Faye felt as if she were living in a dream. Just this morning she had been alone and terrified, and now she was engaged to a man who loved her despite all her complications. "When?" she asked. "When what?" When did you know you had feelings for me? Kade considered the question. The first day I saw you working the saw line, before I knew about the pregnancy. You were pushing logs that were too heavy for you, and your face was set with this look of absolute determination. I thought to myself, that woman has more courage than half my crew put together. And then I found out you were pregnant and still showing up every day, fighting for survival, and he shook his head. I was lost from that moment on. I thought you were going to fire me that day in the office. I thought about it. Not because I wanted to, but because I knew how dangerous it was for you to keep working the saws. Moving you to the office was the compromise I made with myself. I could keep you close and keep you safe. You have been protecting me all this time. I have been trying. Though clearly I should have been more vigilant. He touched her face again, as if reassuring himself that she was really there and really all right. When I saw you on the floor today, I thought, his voice broke. I thought I was going to lose you before I ever had the chance to tell you how I felt. Faye took his hand and pressed it to her cheek. You did not lose me. I am right here and I am not going anywhere. No, you are not. You are staying in this bed for the next 6 weeks if I have to tie you down. She laughed weakly. That sounds uncomfortable. Then do not make me resort to it. Promise me you will follow the doctor's orders. I promise. Kade stayed until she fell asleep, his hand holding hers, his presence a warm anchor in the darkness. When Faye woke in the early hours of morning, he was still there, dozing in the chair with his head resting on the edge of the bed. She watched him sleep, marveling at how dramatically her life had changed in a single day. The next week passed in a strange sort of limbo. True to his word, Kade rearranged his entire life around Faye's care. He visited every morning before going to the mill and every evening after work ended. He brought her books to read and newspapers to keep her informed of world events. He talked to her about the business, asking her opinion on various matters even though she was no longer in the office. Just because you are resting does not mean your mind is not working, he said when she questioned why he was consulting her. Your insights are valuable, Mrs. Crawford proved to be an attentive caretaker, bringing meals and helping Faye with personal matters that she could not manage alone while on bed rest. The landlady's attitude toward Faye had shifted dramatically once word spread about the engagement. Mr. Harrison is a good man, Mrs. Crawford told her one afternoon. You are very fortunate. I know, Faye agreed softly. The wedding was planned for 2 weeks after the collapse, a small ceremony at the boarding house with just Doc Miller and Mrs. Crawford as witnesses. Faye had protested that they should wait until after the baby came, but Kade was adamant. I want you to be my wife as soon as possible, he said. I want you to have my name and my protection officially. The minister arrived on a cold December morning, and Kade helped Faye into the only nice dress she owned, a simple green cotton that had fit her before the pregnancy and now stretched tight across her belly. Mrs. Crawford had pressed it and added some lace at the collar to make it more festive. You look beautiful, Kade said when he saw her, and the sincerity in his voice made Faye believe him despite her swollen ankles and unwashed hair. The ceremony itself was brief. Faye remained seated the entire time, per doctor's orders. Kade stood beside her, holding her hand, his voice steady as he recited the vows. When it came time for Faye to speak, she looked up into his green eyes and felt the truth of every word. I take you, Kade Harrison, to be my lawfully wedded husband. I promise to love you, honor you, and stand beside you for all the days of my life. I take you, Faye Lockhart, to be my lawfully wedded wife. I promise to love you, protect you, and cherish you until my last breath. They exchanged simple gold bands that Kade had purchased from the jeweler in town. And then they were married. Kade leaned down and kissed her gently, sealing the promises they had made. Mrs. Crawford cried happy tears and produced a small cake she had baked for the occasion. They shared it among the small group, and for a few hours, Faye forgot about the bed rest and the fear and simply enjoyed being a new bride. That evening, after the guests had left, Kade returned to Faye's room with several boxes. "What are these?" she asked. "Your things." "I am moving you to the house tonight. But Doc Miller said I should not be moved. I will carry you. You will not have to walk a step." He began packing her meager possessions into the boxes with careful efficiency. "The house is ready for you. I have been preparing it all week." Faye felt tears sting her eyes again. "You have thought of everything." "I am trying." He finished packing and then scooped her up as easily as he had done the day she collapsed. "Ready?" She wrapped her arms around his neck. "Ready." The walk through the dark streets of Terlingua felt surreal. Faye rested her head against Kade's shoulder, listening to the steady rhythm of his heartbeat. He moved carefully, avoiding the rougher sections of road, keeping her as stable as possible. The house was on the eastern edge of town, a small wooden structure with a covered porch and glass windows. Kade pushed the door open with his shoulder and carried her inside. The first thing Faye noticed was the warmth. A fire burned in the fireplace, and lamps were lit throughout the front room. The second thing she noticed was how clean and well-maintained everything was. The furniture was simple but sturdy, and curtains hung in the windows. Kade carried her through to the bedroom, where a large bed had been made up with what looked like new linens. He laid her down gently, then pulled a quilt up over her. "Welcome home," he said softly. Faye looked around the room, taking in the dresser with fresh flowers on top, the rug on the floor, the second lamp on the bedside table. "You did all this for me. I did all this for us." He sat on the edge of the bed. "This is our home now, yours and mine and the baby's." "I do not know what I did to deserve you." "You existed," Kade said simply. That was enough. He stayed with her that night, lying on top of the quilt beside her, their hands intertwined. They talked quietly about the future, about names for the baby and about Kade's plans to expand the lumber operation. Eventually, Faye's eyes grew heavy, and she drifted off to sleep feeling safer and more content than she had in years. The next 6 weeks established a rhythm that became the foundation of their marriage. Kade woke early each morning to start the fire and prepare breakfast. He would bring it to Faye in bed, sitting with her while she ate, and they discussed his plans for the day. Then he would leave for the mill, returning at noon to check on her and bring lunch. In the evenings, he came home as soon as his work allowed, and they would eat dinner together while he told her about the various dramas and successes at the lumber operation. "Tom Fletcher wants to quit," he announced one evening in mid-January. "Says he has an opportunity at a silver mine in Arizona. That is a significant loss. He has been with you since you started the business. I know, but I cannot compete with silver money." Kade cut a piece of chicken and offered it to her. "I am thinking of promoting William Davis to foreman. He has good instincts and the men respect him." Faye chewed thoughtfully. "William is solid, but have you considered Marcus? He has more experience and he understands the business side as well as the practical side." Kade paused, considering this. "You are right. Marcus would be the better choice." He shook his head admiringly. "Even from bed rest, you are the best business advisor I have." "I have nothing else to do but think about your lumber operation." "Our lumber operation," he corrected. "You are my wife. Everything I have is yours." These small moments of domesticity felt precious to Faye. She had never expected to have this: a home, a husband who valued her opinions, a future that held something beyond mere survival. The baby moved constantly now, and Kade loved to put his hand on her belly to feel the kicks. "Strong," he would say approvingly. This child is going to be a fighter like their mother. Or stubborn like their father, Faye would counter, and Kade would laugh. The contractions had stopped completely after the first week of bed rest, and Doc Miller's weekly examinations showed that the baby was thriving. As January turned to February, the doctor finally gave permission for Faye to sit up for short periods and to move around the bedroom if she felt up to it. But no going outside, no climbing stairs, and no heavy lifting, he warned. We are almost there, but we cannot take any chances now. The additional freedom made an enormous difference to Faye's spirits. She could sit in the bedroom chair and look out the window at the desert landscape. She could stand and stretch without feeling guilty. She could embrace Kade properly when he came home in the evenings. Their physical relationship had been chaste since the wedding, with Kade sleeping in the second bedroom to ensure Faye got proper rest. But as she regained some mobility, the awareness between them grew more charged. A touch would linger a moment longer than necessary. A glance would carry weight that made Faye's pulse quicken. One evening in late February, Kade came home looking exhausted. There had been problems with a large shipment, and he had spent the day sorting through the mess. Faye was sitting in the bedroom chair when he entered, and she immediately noticed the tension in his shoulders. "Come here," she said, gesturing to the space in front of her chair. He obeyed without question, kneeling on the floor so she could reach him. Faye placed her hands on his shoulders and began to knead the tight muscles. Kade groaned and let his head fall forward. "That feels incredible," he murmured. "You work too hard," says the woman who worked 12-hour shifts while 7 months pregnant. "That is different." "I was trying to survive. You are trying to conquer the entire territorial lumber market." He chuckled, the sound rumbling through his back into her hands. "Someone has to provide for my family. You already provide more than enough. You do not have to kill yourself doing it." Kade turned his head to look at her, and the expression in his eyes made Faye's breath catch. "I want to give you everything. I want you to have the life you deserve." "I have everything I need right here," she said softly. "I have you." He reached up and caught one of her hands, bringing it to his lips. The kiss was gentle, but it sent heat spiraling through Faye's body. She tugged on his hand, pulling him up, and then she was kissing him properly, her fingers threading through his dark hair. Kade pulled back slightly, his breathing uneven. "We should not. The doctor said bed rest. He did not say I could not kiss my husband." "Faye," she kissed him again, putting all her love and longing into it. Kade groaned and gave in, his arms coming around her carefully, mindful of her belly. They kissed until they were both breathless, until the room felt too warm despite the winter cold outside. When they finally pulled apart, Kade rested his forehead against hers. "I love you so much," he whispered. "I love you beyond reason. I love you too, more than I ever thought possible." That night, Kade returned to sleeping in the main bedroom, fully clothed on top of the covers, his hand resting protectively on her stomach. It was not the wedding night either of them might have imagined, but it was perfect in its own way. The baby came 2 weeks later, on a cold March morning when the desert was touched with the first hints of spring. Faye woke to the familiar pain of contractions, but this time they were stronger and more regular. "Kade," she said, shaking his shoulder. "It is time." He was awake instantly, all traces of sleep vanishing from his face. "Are you certain?" Another contraction answered for her. Kade leaped out of bed and began pulling on his boots. "I will get Doc Miller. Do not move." "Where exactly do you think I am going to go?" Faye managed between gritted teeth. Despite the pain, she saw him smile. "Right. Just try to hold on. I will be back as quickly as I can." He ran out into the pre-dawn darkness, and Faye was left alone with the contractions. They came faster now, each one stronger than the last. She tried to remember the things Mrs. Crawford had told her about childbirth, but the pain drove most coherent thought from her mind. Doc Miller arrived within 20 minutes, with Kade and Mrs. Crawford right behind him. The doctor examined Faye quickly and nodded with satisfaction. The baby is coming fast. This should be over within a few hours. It was the longest few hours of Faye's life. The pain was overwhelming, worse than anything she had imagined. But through it all, Kade was there, holding her hand, wiping her face with cool cloths, whispering encouragement. "You can do this. You are the strongest person I know. Just a little longer, my love. Just a little longer." When the baby finally came, the sound of their cry filled the room. Faye collapsed back against the pillows, exhausted beyond measure. "A boy," Doc Miller announced. "A healthy boy." Mrs. Crawford cleaned the baby and wrapped him in blankets, then placed him carefully in Faye's arms. She looked down at the tiny face, the dark hair, the perfect miniature fingers, and felt her heart expand to impossible proportions. "He is beautiful," she whispered. Kade leaned over them, his eyes suspiciously bright. "He is perfect. You are perfect." He kissed her forehead. "Thank you for this gift. What should we name him?" Faye asked. They had discussed names over the past months but had never settled on anything definite. Kade studied the baby's face thoughtfully. "James," he said finally. "James Kade Harrison, after my father, and," he paused. "And me, if that is all right with you." "James," Faye repeated, testing it. "I like it. James Harrison." The baby James yawned and blinked up at them with unfocused eyes. Kade reached out tentatively and touched one tiny hand. James immediately grasped his father's finger with surprising strength. "He already knows you," Faye said softly. "I am his father," Kade replied, and the certainty in his voice made Faye fall in love with him all over again. He had claimed this child as his own from the moment he proposed, never once wavering or showing doubt. Doc Miller finished his examination and pronounced both mother and baby healthy. "She needs rest," he told Kade, "and the baby will need to eat frequently, but barring any complications, they should both be fine." After the doctor and Mrs. Crawford left, Kade carefully took James from Faye's arms so she could sleep. She watched through heavy eyelids as her husband sat in the bedroom chair, cradling the baby with surprising confidence. "You look natural with him," she murmured. "I feel terrified," Kade admitted. "He is so small." "What if I do something wrong?" "You will not. You are going to be an amazing father." "I am certainly going to try." He looked down at James, and his expression softened into something infinitely tender. "I promise you," he said to the baby, "I will love you and protect you every day of your life. You will always know you are wanted and valued." Faye felt tears slip down her cheeks. "He is so lucky to have you." "We are all lucky to have each other," Kade corrected. He stood and carried James over to the bed, settling down beside Faye with the baby between them. "This is our family. This is what matters." Faye rested her head on Kade's shoulder, her hand on James's tiny chest, feeling the flutter of his heartbeat. Everything she had endured, the abandonment, the fear, the desperate struggle to survive, had led to this moment. And she would do it all again in a heartbeat if it meant ending up here with this man and this child. "I love you," she whispered. "I love you too," Kade replied. "Both of you. Forever." The first weeks with James were exhausting and wonderful in equal measure. The baby woke every few hours to eat, which meant neither Faye nor Kade got much sleep. But Kade never complained. He would wake with Faye for the nighttime feedings, changing James's diaper and walking him around the room when he was fussy. "You do not have to do this," Faye told him one night when she found him pacing the bedroom with a screaming James. "You have to work tomorrow." "And you have to care for a baby all day tomorrow," Kade countered. "We share the burden. That is what marriage is." Faye was not sure that most husbands in 1885 would agree with that philosophy, but she was grateful for it nonetheless. Kade approached fatherhood the same way he approached business, with dedication and a willingness to learn. He read books about infant care and asked Doc Miller questions during his weekly checkups. He built a cradle for James with his own hands, sanding it smooth so there were no rough edges. By April, Faye had recovered enough from the birth to move around the house freely. She still tired easily, but it felt good to be up and doing things again. She cooked meals and cleaned and cared for James, finding joy in the domestic routines she had never expected to experience. One afternoon, while James was napping, she decided to tackle the garden that the previous owner had planted. The spring rains had brought weeds along with the flowers, and the whole thing was becoming overgrown. She was on her hands and knees pulling weeds when she heard Kade's voice behind her. "What do you think you are doing?" She looked up to find him standing with his arms crossed, an expression of exasperation on his face. "Gardening. You just had a baby 2 months ago. You should be resting." "I have been resting for 6 months. I need to do something productive." "Taking care of James is productive. He is asleep, and I was going crazy sitting in that house." She stood, brushing dirt from her skirt. "I am fine, Kade. Really, I am not fragile." He studied her for a long moment, then sighed. "No, you are not fragile. You are stubborn and determined and entirely too independent for your own good." "Is that a complaint?" "It is an observation." He came closer and tipped her chin up with one finger. "Just promise me you will not overdo it. If you feel tired or if anything hurts, you will stop immediately." "I promise." He kissed her, slow and deep, and when they pulled apart, Faye felt breathless for reasons that had nothing to do with exertion. "How much longer did Doc Miller say we had to wait?" Kade asked, his voice rough. Faye felt heat rise in her cheeks. "Another month." "That is too long." "It is doctor's orders." "I know." He kissed her forehead. "I am going back to the mill. Try not to dig up the entire yard before I return." He left, and Faye went back to her weeding with a smile on her face. Their marriage had been born out of necessity and crisis, but it had grown into something beautiful and real. She loved Kade more with each passing day, and she could see in his eyes that he felt the same. As spring turned to summer, their life fell into comfortable patterns. Kade continued to build his lumber business, taking on larger contracts and expanding his operation. Faye helped where she could, keeping the books for the business from home and offering advice on difficult negotiations. James grew rapidly, transforming from a wrinkled newborn into a chubby baby with dark hair and his father's green eyes. "He looks like you," Faye told Kade one evening as they watched James play on a blanket on the floor. "He looks like himself," Kade replied. But she could see the pleasure in his face at the suggestion. The biological father had never made contact, and Faye found she no longer thought about him at all. Kade was James's father in every way that mattered. He was the one who walked the floor with the baby at night, who made funny faces to elicit giggles, who worried about every cough and sniffle. In late June, Doc Miller finally gave Faye permission to resume all normal activities. That night, after they put James to bed in his cradle, Kade and Faye finally came together as husband and wife in the fullest sense. It was tender and passionate, and everything Faye had dreamed of during the long months of waiting. Afterward, lying in Kade's arms with her head on his chest, Faye felt complete. "I never thought I could be this happy," she whispered. "Neither did I." Kade's hand traced lazy patterns on her back. "I thought I would build my business and maybe eventually marry someone suitable, but I never expected love. I never expected you. Is it everything you hoped for? This life we have built? It is better than I ever imagined." He tilted her face up to kiss her. You are better than I ever imagined." They made love again, slowly and thoroughly, relearning each other's bodies without the barrier of pregnancy between them. When they finally fell asleep, tangled together beneath the sheets, Faye felt as if she were floating. The next year passed in a blur of happiness. James learned to crawl and then to walk, his unsteady steps across the living room floor causing both parents to hover nervously. Kade taught him words like timber and sawdust, much to Faye's amusement. The lumber business continued to thrive, and Kade hired additional workers to handle the increased demand. In the fall of 1886, Faye realized she was pregnant again. This time, the discovery brought only joy. She told Kade over dinner one evening, and he swept her into his arms with such enthusiasm that he nearly knocked over the table. "Another baby," he breathed. "We are having another baby. Are you happy?" "Happy, I am ecstatic." He pulled back to look at her face. "How are you feeling? Are you well? Should I get Doc Miller?" Faye laughed. "I am fine. It is very early still. I only just confirmed it. But you will be careful this time. No working yourself to exhaustion. I promise. This pregnancy will be completely different from the last one," and it was. Faye spent her pregnancy in the comfort of their home, well-fed and well-rested, with a husband who doted on her constantly. She continued to help with the business accounts, but stopped when she became tired. James kept her busy chasing after a curious toddler, but Kade hired a young woman from town to help with the housework so Faye would not strain herself. The new baby arrived in May of 1887, another healthy boy they named Thomas William Harrison. Unlike James's dramatic entrance into the world, Thomas came easily and quickly, with Doc Miller barely arriving in time for the birth. "You are a natural at this," the doctor said approvingly as he examined the newest Harrison. "Or I am just getting practice," Faye replied, exhausted but smiling. James was fascinated by his baby brother, wanting to touch him constantly. Kade had to gently redirect their older son multiple times, explaining that babies were delicate and needed to be handled carefully. "Brother," James would say proudly, pointing at Thomas. "That is right. Your brother. You are going to help take care of him, right?" James nodded enthusiastically. Though at barely 2 years old, his helping mostly consisted of bringing diapers when asked and singing loudly to the baby. With 2 children under 3, life became chaotic in the best possible way. The house that had once seemed spacious now felt small, especially as the boys grew. In the summer of 1887, Kade announced that he was building them a new house on a plot of land he had purchased on the edge of town. "It will have 4 bedrooms, a proper kitchen, and a parlor," he told Faye as they reviewed the plans, "and a large front porch where we can sit in the evenings." 4 bedrooms seems excessive for 2 children. Kade raised an eyebrow. "Only 2? I was hoping for several more." Faye felt warmth spread through her chest. "You want more children?" "I want as many as you are willing to give me. I love being a father. I love our family. I want to fill that big house with babies and noise and life." She kissed him, long and deep. "Then we will fill it together." The new house was completed in the spring of 1888, just before Faye delivered their 3rd child, a daughter they named Clara Rose Harrison. She had her mother's features and her father's determination, making her opinions known from the moment she entered the world. "She is going to keep us on our toes," Doc Miller predicted, and he was absolutely right. Clara refused to sleep through the night, kept James and Thomas awake with her crying, and demanded constant attention. But she also brought immense joy to the family. Kade was smitten with his daughter, carrying her around the house and talking to her as if she could understand every word. "You are spoiling her," Faye accused gently. "She is my princess. I am allowed to spoil her." Faye shook her head but could not find it in herself to object. Watching Kade with their children was one of her greatest pleasures. He was endlessly patient with James and Thomas, teaching them about the lumber business and taking them to the mill on Saturdays. He was gentle with Clara, comforting her when she cried and celebrating every small milestone. As the years passed, their family continued to grow. Another son, Peter, was born in 1890, followed by twin girls, Elizabeth and Margaret, in 1892. The house that had seemed too large when they first moved in was now filled to capacity with children and love and chaos. The lumber business flourished under Kade's leadership. He expanded into furniture manufacturing, hiring skilled carpenters to create pieces that were sold throughout the territory. Faye managed the business side of operations, keeping the books and handling correspondence. They worked as a team, just as they had in those early days in the office, but now they worked from home so Faye could be close to the children. Terlingua itself grew and changed around them. The mercury mines brought more people to the area, and the town expanded to accommodate the influx. Schools were established, churches built, stores opened. The Harrisons became pillars of the community, known for their successful business and their large, boisterous family. On a warm evening in the summer of 1895, Faye and Kade sat on the front porch of their home, watching their 6 children play in the yard. James, now 10 years old, was teaching his younger siblings a game involving a ball and wickets. Clara, at 7, was arguing about the rules. The twins ran in circles, shrieking with laughter. Peter and Thomas attempted to mediate between James and Clara with limited success. "They are going to wake every neighbor within a mile," Kade observed, but he was smiling. "They are happy. That is what matters." He reached over and took her hand, lacing their fingers together. "Do you remember that day in my office, when I told you that you could not work the saw line anymore? I remember thinking you were going to fire me. I was terrified. I was terrified too. Terrified that you were going to hurt yourself or the baby. Terrified that I would not be able to protect you." He brought her hand to his lips and kissed her knuckles. "I had already fallen in love with you by then, you know. I just had not admitted it to myself yet." Faye leaned her head on his shoulder. "I fell in love with you slowly over those months in the office. Every small kindness, every thoughtful gesture, you made me feel valued and safe. I had never felt that way before. You deserved to feel that way. You deserved everything. And you gave it to me. You gave me a home, a family, a life beyond anything I imagined possible." She looked up at him. "You carried me out of that office and made me rest completely, even though I fought you on it. You saved my life, Kade. You saved us. You saved me too. Before you, I was just a man building a business. You gave me purpose. You gave me love." He kissed her softly. "These 11 years with you have been the best of my life. Only 11 years. We have at least 50 more ahead of us. Then I am the luckiest man alive." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sun set over the desert and their children play in the fading light. Clara came running up to the porch, her face flushed with exertion. "Papa, James says I cannot play because I am a girl. Tell him that is not fair." Kade pulled his daughter onto his lap. "Your brother is wrong. Girls can do anything boys can do. Sometimes they can do it better." "That is what Mama says. Your mother is a very wise woman. Now go tell James that I said you can play, and if he argues, he will be doing extra chores tomorrow." Clara kissed her father's cheek and ran back to the game victorious. Kade watched her go with an expression of pure contentment. "You are a good father," Faye said. "The best father. I learned from the best mother." He stood and pulled her to her feet. "Come on. Let us go wrangle these children and get them ready for bed. Good luck with that. It usually takes an hour. Then we had better start now." They went down the porch steps together, hand in hand, calling their children inside. The chaos of bedtime routines followed washing faces, brushing teeth, reading stories, tucking in blankets. By the time all 6 children were finally settled, Faye was exhausted. She collapsed onto the bed in the room she shared with Kade, and he joined her a moment later. "Remind me why we wanted 6 children," she asked. "Because we love chaos. That must be it." He pulled her close, and she curled into his side, fitting perfectly the way she always had. This was home, not the house or the town or even the business. Home was wherever Kade was, wherever their children were. Home was the family they had built from nothing. "I love you," Faye whispered into the darkness. "I love you too," Kade replied. "Today, tomorrow, and always." Outside, the Texas night settled over Terlingua, stars emerging one by one in the vast desert sky. Inside the Harrison house, a family slept, safe and warm and loved. And in the morning, they would wake to do it all again, the beautiful, messy, perfect chaos of a life built on love and sacrifice, and the courage to take a chance on each other. Years continued to pass, marked by the milestones of their children's lives. James grew into a serious young man who followed his father into the lumber business, learning every aspect of the operation with the same dedication Kade had shown. Thomas proved to have a gift for numbers and took over the accounting side of things, working alongside his mother. Clara, true to her strong-willed nature, decided she wanted to be a teacher and pursued her education with fierce determination. Peter discovered a talent for carpentry and spent hours in the workshop creating intricate furniture pieces. The twins, Elizabeth and Margaret, were inseparable and decided together that they wanted to help run a general store, studying business practices and saving their money toward that goal. Kade and Faye watched their children grow and pursue their dreams with pride. They had given their children something precious: the freedom to choose their own paths and the support to succeed in whatever they chose. On their 20th wedding anniversary, in December of 1904, the entire family gathered for a celebration dinner. The children, now ranging in age from 12 to 20, filled the house with noise and laughter. Grandchildren had begun to arrive too. James had married a lovely young woman named Sarah 2 years prior, and they now had a baby daughter of their own. After the meal, James stood and raised his glass. "I want to make a toast to my parents. Everything I am, everything we all are, comes from the example they set. They taught us about hard work and dedication. They taught us about love and sacrifice. They showed us what it means to build a life together." "Hear, hear," Thomas added. "To the best parents in Texas." The children all raised their glasses, and Faye felt tears streaming down her face. Kade's arm came around her shoulders, pulling her close. "They turned out all right," he murmured in her ear. "Better than all right. They are wonderful." That night, after everyone had gone home or gone to bed, Faye and Kade sat once again on their front porch, bundled in blankets against the December chill. "You remember what you were doing 20 years ago tonight?" Kade asked. "I was in a boarding house room, married earlier that day to a man I barely knew, terrified about what the future would hold. And now I am sitting beside my husband of 20 years, surrounded by children and grandchildren, completely at peace with the life we have built." She turned to look at him. "You gave me everything, Kade. You gave me love when I thought I was unlovable. You gave me a family when I thought I would always be alone. You gave me hope." "We gave each other those things," he corrected. "You made me whole, Faye. Before you, I was just surviving, just building a business because I did not know what else to do with myself. You gave me purpose. You gave me a reason to come home at night. You gave me love." They kissed, and even after 20 years, Faye felt the same flutter in her chest that she had felt that first time in her boarding house room when Kade had proposed. "I would do it all again," she said when they pulled apart. "Every moment of fear and pain and uncertainty. I would do it all again if it meant ending up here with you." "So would I," Kade agreed, 1,000 times over. As they sat together under the stars, Faye thought about the journey that had brought them to this moment. She thought about the desperate pregnant woman who had tried to hide her condition while working in a lumber mill. She thought about the timber boss who had seen through her disguise and had chosen compassion over judgment. She thought about the cowboy who had carried her broken body out of that office and had made her rest completely, against all her protests. That moment had been the turning point. That single act of care had opened the door to everything that followed. Kade had saved her life that day, but more than that, he had given her a reason to live. He had shown her what love looked like in action, not just pretty words but concrete deeds. He had protected her and provided for her and stood by her through every challenge, and she had given him something too. She had given him a family, yes, but also a partner, someone who understood his dreams and supported his ambitions, someone who could challenge him when necessary and comfort him when needed. They had built a life together, stone by stone, day by day, choice by choice. "What are you thinking about?" Kade asked, noticing her contemplative expression. "I am thinking about how lucky we are, how easily things could have gone differently. If you had fired me instead of moving me to the office, if you had not been there when I collapsed, if you had not carried me out and made me rest. But I was there, and I did carry you out, and I will always be here, Faye, for as long as I have breath in my body. Promise, I promise, we are in this together for the rest of our lives." Faye leaned against him, letting his warmth seep into her bones. The desert night was cold, but she felt warm and safe and loved. Their story had begun in desperation and fear, but it had transformed into something beautiful. They had taken broken pieces, a pregnant woman with no hope, a lonely man with no purpose, and had created something whole and strong. The lumber business would eventually pass to James and Thomas. The house would someday belong to one of their children, but the love they had built, the family they had created, that would endure for generations. Their grandchildren and great-grandchildren would hear the story of how Kade Harrison had carried Faye Lockhart out of a lumber mill office and had demanded she rest, how that simple act of kindness had sparked a love story that lasted a lifetime. "Come on," Kade said eventually, standing and pulling Faye to her feet. "It is getting too cold out here. Let us go inside." They walked into the warm house together, just as they had done thousands of times before and would do thousands of times more. They locked the door, checked on the younger children who still lived at home, and made their way to their bedroom. As they settled into bed, Faye curled into Kade's arms, fitting perfectly the way she always had. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and new joys. The children would continue to grow and change. The business would face new opportunities and obstacles. Life would continue in all its beautiful, complicated glory. But tonight, in this moment, everything was perfect. Faye had her husband's arms around her, her children sleeping safely under her roof, and a lifetime of memories warming her heart. She had started with nothing and had ended up with everything. "I love you," she whispered one more time. "I love you too," Kade replied, his voice already drowsy with approaching sleep. "Forever and always." And as Faye drifted off to sleep, she smiled, knowing that forever with Kade Harrison would never be long enough. They had built something rare and precious in the harsh desert of West Texas, a love that had survived every trial, a family that had thrived against all odds, and a partnership that had only grown stronger with time. Their story had begun with a timber boss who had seen a struggling woman and had chosen compassion. It had continued with a cowboy's strength as he carried her to safety and demanded she rest. and it had evolved into a love story that would be told and retold. A reminder that sometimes the greatest love stories begin in the most unlikely circumstances, with the simplest acts of kindness, and with two people brave enough to take a chance on each other, despite every reason not to. The Harrisons' lumber business continued to thrive well into the new century, becoming one of the most successful operations in the territory. But more important than any business success was the legacy of love and family that Kade and Faye created. Their children grew up knowing they were cherished and valued. Their grandchildren learned from their example what it meant to build a strong marriage. And the story of how their grandmother had worked herself to exhaustion while pregnant, and how their grandfather had carried her out and made her rest completely, became family legend, a story about love conquering fear, about kindness transforming lives, and about two people who found each other in the unlikeliest of places and built a love that lasted forever. As the years turned into decades and Kade and Faye grew old together, they never forgot those early days. They never forgot the fear and uncertainty, the desperate struggle for survival, the moment when everything changed. Those memories kept them humble and grateful, reminded them daily of how precious their life together truly was. They watched their children marry and have children of their own. They watched their grandchildren grow and start families. They saw their great-grandchildren take their first steps. And through it all, they remained partners, lovers, best friends. The foundation they had built in that small office in a lumber mill, strengthened by trials and cemented by unwavering commitment, proved unshakable. On quiet evenings, they would still sit on their porch, holding hands and watching the desert sunset. They would reminisce about the old days, laugh about the challenges they had overcome, and marvel at the family they had created. And Faye would sometimes look at her husband, older now, his dark hair gone gray, his face lined with the years, and would see the same man who had carried her out of that office, who had refused to let her give up, who had loved her when she felt unlovable. "What would have happened if you had fired me that day?" she asked him once, many years after their wedding. Kade had considered the question seriously. "I would have spent the rest of my life building a successful business and living a hollow existence. I would have had money and respect, but no joy, no love, no family, no you. So you saved yourself as much as you saved me. More, you gave me everything, Faye, everything that matters." As they entered their golden years, their love only deepened. They had weathered every storm together: financial difficulties during economic downturns, illnesses and injuries, the normal trials of raising 6 children. They had celebrated countless victories, business successes, children's weddings, grandchildren's births. Through it all, they had remained united, their bond growing stronger with each passing year. The town of Terlingua changed around them. The mercury mines eventually played out, and many people moved away seeking opportunities elsewhere. But the Harrisons remained, their roots too deep to pull up, their life too precious to abandon. The lumber business adapted and evolved, and the family continued to thrive. When Kade turned 70, the family threw him a grand celebration. All 6 children attended with their spouses and children. The house overflowed with people and noise and love. During the party, Faye pulled her husband aside to a quiet corner. "You did it," she told him, taking his lined hand in hers. "You built everything you dreamed of and more." "We did it," he corrected, as he always did. "Every success, every triumph, we did it together." "You have any regrets?" "Not a single one. How could I regret anything when it led me to you?" They kissed, and even after 5 decades together, the kiss still made Faye's heart race. Some loves fade with time, worn down by the daily grind of living. But theirs had only grown stronger, polished by the years into something brilliant and unbreakable. As they rejoined the party, surrounded by the family they had created, Faye felt overwhelming gratitude. She thought about the frightened young woman she had been, working herself to death in a lumber mill, convinced she would end up alone and destitute. She could never have imagined this future, this big, beautiful, complicated life full of love and laughter and belonging. And it had all started because one man had chosen compassion over convenience. Because Kade Harrison had seen a struggling woman and had decided to help rather than judge. Because he had carried her out when she could not walk on her own and had made her rest when she wanted to keep fighting. That single act of kindness had changed everything. The party continued late into the evening, with music and dancing and stories told and retold. The grandchildren begged for the story of how their grandparents had met, as they always did. And Faye and Kade obliged, taking turns telling the tale: the lumber mill, the hidden pregnancy, the collapse, the proposal, the wedding. And Grandpa carried Grandma all the way to the boarding house. One of the youngest grandchildren asked, eyes wide. He did, Faye confirmed. He carried me to safety and refused to let me work myself to death. He saved my life. We saved each other, Kade added, pulling his wife close. That is what people who love each other do. The children absorbed this wisdom, storing it away for their own futures. They were learning, just by watching their grandparents, what real love looked like. They were seeing that love was not just romance and passion, though those things had their place. Love was also sacrifice and commitment. Love was carrying someone when they could not walk. Love was making them rest when they wanted to push themselves too hard. Love was choosing each other every single day, no matter what challenges arose. As the celebration wound down and family members began to depart, making their way back to their various homes, Faye and Kade stood at the door bidding everyone goodbye. Clara was the last to leave, kissing both her parents on the cheek. You two are the example I measure every relationship against, she told them. You set the bar impossibly high. The bar is not that high, Kade replied. You just have to find someone who loves you enough to put your needs before their own wants. Someone who sees you really sees you and loves what they see. And then you have to be willing to do the same for them, Faye added. Love is not one person giving while the other takes. It is both people giving everything they have. Clara hugged them both once more and left, and finally, Kade and Faye were alone in their quiet house. They moved through the familiar routine of cleaning up from the party, working in comfortable synchrony born of decades together. When everything was tidy, they made their way to the bedroom, helping each other with buttons and clasps as they changed for bed. Thank you for today, Kade said as they settled under the covers. For the party and for 5 decades of happiness. Thank you for everything, Faye replied. For saving me, for loving me, for building this life with me. Best decision I ever made was moving you to that office. Second best was proposing to you. Everything good in my life comes from those 2 choices. Everything good in my life comes from you. They fell asleep holding hands, the way they had done almost every night for 50 years. And in the morning, they would wake up and do it all again, the beautiful, ordinary routine of a marriage built on love and trust and unwavering commitment. The seasons continued to turn, bringing changes both large and small. Grandchildren grew up and started families of their own, making Kade and Faye great-grandparents multiple times over. The family tree they had started with just themselves, and baby James now sprawled across several pages, branches reaching in every direction. The lumber business eventually transitioned fully to the next generation, with James and Thomas taking over complete control. Kade retired at 75, finally convinced by Faye that it was time to enjoy the fruits of their labor. They spent their retirement traveling a bit, visiting places they had only read about in books during those early days in the office. They saw the ocean for the first time together, marveling at the endless blue water. They visited big cities with towering buildings and museums full of art. But they always came back to Terlingua, to the house they had filled with children and love, to the town that had been the backdrop of their greatest adventure. This was home, and no matter how far they wandered, this was where they belonged. On their 60th wedding anniversary, the entire family gathered once again. The house could no longer hold everyone, so they moved the celebration to the lumber mill yard, transforming it with decorations and long tables laden with food. Nearly 100 people attended: children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, extended family, and friends from 6 decades of living in Terlingua. Kade and Faye sat in places of honor, holding court like the beloved monarchs of their family kingdom. Person after person came to them with stories and memories, each one a thread in the tapestry of their shared life. As the sun began to set, James stood to make another toast. He was in his 60s now, his own hair gray, his own face lined. But in his eyes, Faye could still see the boy he had been, the baby she had feared for and fought for and loved with every fiber of her being. 60 years ago today, my father made the best decision of his life, James began. He married my mother in a small ceremony at a boarding house, promising to love and protect her and the child she carried me. He could have walked away. No one would have blamed him. But he chose love instead of convenience. He chose family instead of reputation. He chose to be my father, even though he did not have to be. Tears streamed down Faye's face as she listened to her son speak. And my mother, James continued, showed me what courage looks like. She fought for survival when everything was stacked against her. She worked impossible hours under dangerous conditions because she refused to give up. She taught me that strength is not about physical power. It is about getting up every single day and doing what needs to be done, no matter how hard it is. Together, they taught all of us what love really means. Not the easy love of good times, but the hard love of sacrifice and commitment. The love that carries someone when they cannot walk. The love that makes someone rest when they want to keep fighting. The love that chooses the other person over and over again for 6 decades. He raised his glass. To Kade and Faye Harrison. To the greatest love story Terlingua has ever known. To 60 years of marriage, and to 60 more if we are lucky enough to keep them that long. To Kade and Faye. The crowd echoed, and the sound of 100 voices raised in celebration rolled across the desert evening. Kade stood, helping Faye to her feet, and they faced their assembled family. "We do not have words adequate to express what this means to us," Kade said, his voice rough with emotion. "You are our legacy. You are our greatest achievement. This family, this love, this life, it is everything." Faye nodded, too overcome to speak. She looked out at the sea of faces, children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, all of them here because of choices she and Kade had made 60 years ago. Because a timber boss had chosen compassion. Because a cowboy had carried her to safety. Because they had both been brave enough to choose love. The celebration continued long into the night, with music and dancing and stories. As it grew late, Kade and Faye slipped away from the crowd, walking hand in hand to the edge of the property where they could see the stars spread across the desert sky. 60 years, Faye marveled. Where did the time go? It went into building this. Kade gestured back toward the celebration. Into creating something that will outlast us both. You think they understand, the children and grandchildren? Do they truly understand how remarkable this is? Some do. Some will understand when they are older, but they all feel it, even if they cannot put it into words. They feel the love we built. It surrounds them like air. It is the foundation they stand on. Faye rested her head on his shoulder, fitting into the familiar space even though they had both grown smaller with age. I am so grateful for all of it, even the hard parts. Especially the hard parts because they brought us closer together. I would not change a single moment, Kade agreed. Not one. Every triumph and every trial brought us here to this night, to this family. How could I regret any of it? They stood in comfortable silence, listening to the sounds of their family celebrating in the distance. Faye thought about how different her life could have been if she had not come to Terlingua, if she had not taken the job at the lumber mill. If Kade had not seen through her disguise and moved her to the office. If he had not carried her out when she collapsed. So many small choices, so many pivotal moments. But they had all led here to this perfect evening, to 60 years of marriage, to a family that numbered in the dozens, to a love that had only deepened with time. We should get back, Kade said eventually. They will wonder where we went. Let them wonder for a few more minutes. I want to remember this, just you and me under the stars, like that night on our 20th anniversary, like so many nights before and since. So they stayed, holding each other in the desert darkness, two people who had started with nothing and had built everything. The timber boss who had seen a struggling woman and had chosen kindness. The pregnant woman who had fought for survival with every ounce of strength she possessed. The cowboy who had carried her to safety and had made her rest completely. The family they had created together, against all odds. Their story was not one of instant passion or dramatic gestures. It was a story of daily choices, of small kindnesses accumulated over decades, of commitments sustained through joy and sorrow alike. It was a story of real love, the kind that shows up every single day, that carries you when you fall, that insists you rest when you are working yourself to death. It was, Faye thought as they finally walked back toward their celebrating family, the very best kind of love story. Not because it was easy, but because it was real. Not because it was perfect, but because it was theirs. And after 60 years, it was still going strong, still growing, still teaching everyone who witnessed it what love could be when two people were brave enough to truly commit to each other. As they rejoined the party, their great-grandchildren ran up to them, begging for one more dance. And Kade and Faye obliged, moving slowly across the makeshift dance floor, surrounded by the family their love had created. The music played, the stars shone, and the Harrison legacy continued, built on a foundation of a timber boss's compassion and a cowboy's strength, sustained by 60 years of unwavering love.